there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Female Empowered Podcast. I'm really excited for this episode because it's something I've actually been wanting to talk about for quite a long time. And it actually is a very long story. So it is going to be split up into two episodes, two parts, part one and part two. Part one, we're going to give today. And part two will be on the show will air next week. It also saves you from having to listen to a 1 hour long podcast episode, which some of you might like, but some of you might not. I'm taking a little sip of water. So, what we're going to talk about today is how I tried to sell my business and it didn't go exactly as I planned. And for those of you that have followed me for a while, I think this is the 280. I think this is like episode 288 on my podcast. So that's pretty crazy that I've been doing this for so many years. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be my fifth year doing this podcast. So if you followed me that whole time, you kind of know my story. But if you're relatively new to following this episode, this podcast and myself, I'll give you a little bit of the backstory involved in Pilates and Grove and myself, so you kind of have a little bit of a history and understanding of what got me to where I am today. So I actually opened the original LLC on my birthday, January 25th of 2008. Let's see, that would have made me 30 something years old, like 34, 35 years old. I can't remember. I'm 51 now. Anyway, so you can do the math. If that was for my very first studio location, that was called Pilates on the Beach. It was a small, probably 300 to 400 square feet max. I think 300 square feet probably studio. I had four or three other partners in that venture, and I started that studio with $2,400. That's it. A check for $2,400. Um, the three of us put in $2,400 and one person put in equipment. And I think our rent was like $1,800. So that covered, we got like first, last security in. We borrowed the equipment. We bought like one reformer and that was it. We just started. And the reason it kind of started was because I was working for a physical therapy practice, an insurance-based practice, actually. I'd probably been a therapist for 10 years. I was probably 4 or 5 years into being Pilates certified and Pilates trained, and the physical therapy clinic that I worked for. I was a clinic director and it was a Pilates-based PT practice. And so I remember saying to my boss at the time, like, hey, I just think this is like so silly. We have all this built-in clientele, people that love Pilates when they're done, and we have nowhere to send them. We're sending them to all of these other studios across the city that we have no real affiliation for. And I said, that's so silly. We should try to have something where we could like keep at least maybe small groups after. And he said to me, great, go ahead and start that business. And I was like, what? No, I don't know what to do to start a business. I mean, if you want to go even further back, my story, my mom, I was raised by a single mom. She did not go to college. I guess I want to say, I don't even want to say she immigrated. She like escaped communist Cuba to come to the United States as a young teenager. And I had no entrepreneurship or business ownership modeled for me. I didn't know that that was a possibility. I thought that's what rich people did because you had to have money to start your own business. So anyways, actually one of my patients at the time and then her best friend were kind of like, yeah, we'd love to do this. We'll do it with you. And so that's how it started. Four of us went into partnership together. We opened our doors in 2008. So if you're old enough to know what was happening financially in our country, in 2008, many people weren't opening businesses then, but I was too young and broke to understand that we were going through a full-blown recession. And we just set out on a mission to, I just really wanted to have a place for my patients when they were done with physical therapy to start doing Pilates. And there really, really weren't that many Pilates studios around. I think at the time we were on Miami Beach, and I think I knew of one on Miami Beach, probably like 15 minutes south of us. And I knew one like 15 or 30 minutes north of us. There weren't that many. And so this was not really a popular concept. And certainly private pay physical therapy was definitely not a popular concept at all. And so, yeah, that's how it started. 2008. I was still kept my job at the Pilates clinic, and I taught, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 nights a week or something like that. We kind of shared all responsibilities. We built our own website. We decorated the place ourselves. We taught at the time I was the only instructor because my other partners were not. And so early challenges, building a client base, managing operations, establishing a brand identity, knowing what a brand identity was. Um, and fast forward, I think we grew really fast, and we eventually opened up a second location a couple blocks away. At that point, I resigned from my clinic position and went all in on the business. Uh, a year after that, we opened a third location, Pilates in the Grove. 2 years after that, there was a partnership dissolution, and I sold my shares of Pilates on the Beach and became the sole owner of Pilates in the Grove. I believe that was 2011, maybe 2012. It's hard to go back to think about it because it was so long ago. But yes, I think that was about it. So at the time, then I was kind of on my own. I was the sole owner of a growing Pilates and cash-based private pay physical therapy business. I did not at that point think that the business would grow to more than, I don't know, 350,000 in revenue. And I thought, wow, if I can get to the point that I can pay myself 90 to $100,000 a year and have my own business, and then maybe eventually make some passive income from there so I don't have to work as much for the 100,000. Like that's what I thought. And hence why I never named it my name. Um, my image and likeness is around the studio, but it was never the focal point of the studio. I always wanted to make it about the community, about more than just me, because my intention was I never had the intention to sell it. Really, I didn't. But because I didn't know that was an option, I just had the intention of maybe one day I could work like 2 days a week and still make $90,000. And so that's really how Pilates in the Grove started. So we opened in 2010. I think we dissolved my partnership in 2011 or 2012. 2015, we opened a second location under Pilates in the Grove in a different part of town. So now we were at two locations, and we had surpassed the $500,000 mark. We were approaching 750,000, $800,000. And I was doing everything in the business. And so when I opened the second location, was a real eye opener that I could not run this business anymore on just like grit and grinding it out, because I couldn't be in two places at the same time. And I lived probably a walking distance from the studio in Coconut Grove, maybe 3 blocks. And so if there was ever an emergency, I could walk there. At this point, I was no longer living there. I was living where I was driving distance. And again, it just doesn't work when you have multiple locations, multiple staff, and you're trying to grow and scale when you don't have processes, systems, and a full-blown operational manual. Okay. So it really hit me like a ton of bricks, when I opened that second location, which would have ultimately been like my fourth location. But I was learning little by little, but that was the first time that I was ever like, oh my gosh, I can no longer play like man to man. I have to play zone defense here. And we're growing. We have all this clientele. We're doing really, really well. But the back end of a business, and any of you that have opened a business or run a business know that like the teaching is the easy part. The treating the patients is the easy part. The hard part is, systematizing your operations, diversifying your services, diversifying your revenue streams, leveraging technology, um, improving HR mechanisms, client journeys and customer journey mapping and market research and sale development and all of this stuff. That is the hard part of starting, running, and growing, especially a service-based business. So I had a great team. I really did. I had some amazing people working for me, with me. I have very, very high standards for myself. I'm an Enneagram 3, if any of you guys follow that. And my top strength and strength fighters is achiever. And so I have very high expectations of myself. I'm a high achiever. And so I have high expectations of those around me. And so when I had assembled a really great and competent team, but what I did not do was properly empower them to effectively operate without my oversight and without my consent. And that really was my own doing. I was such an overfunctioner that I was creating an underfunctioning team because I felt like I had to have my eyes on everything that went out the door, everything that was said, every email that was sent. And that's when I really understood, like, I cannot go on like this anymore. So in 2018, maybe it was, I started, excuse me, embarking on this journey to build out a better operational system, basically. And so I underwent the EOS training, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is basically through the book Traction, based on the book Traction. And so once that happened, and I started to build out an organizational chart, an accountability chart, and I started to hold people accountable, and I started to allow people to make mistakes, and I hired a director of operations so that they could take some of that work off of my plate. That's when we really started to transform the business. So in 2017, 2016, maybe even 2016, we surpassed $1 million. 2017, I basically imploded. 2018, I started going through this process and I hired a COO, which was my first non-revenue generating six-figure salary. So I think at that time, I had never hired somebody for a six-figure salary that wasn't generating revenue. And so it was a big leap, but it was what the business needed. And I knew that I needed someone that did not, that I didn't have, sorry, let me start again. I knew I needed to hire someone that had a skill set that I did not have, that could help us really leverage technology so that we could grow and start to automate things in the business, because me having my thumbprint on everything was not sustainable. It really was not sustainable. So 2018 surpassed over $1 million, 2019 over $1 million. 2020, we all knew what happened, right? So 2020 was like a kick in the gut. And it was the one thing that made it a little bit easier was that everyone was going through the same thing. So the mindset of like, well, I'm getting crushed because of me, or because I'm not good enough, or I don't know what I'm doing, kind of went out the window, because every single person, especially in the fitness and wellness industry, was going through the exact same thing. And so at that time, I joined a mastermind who I'm so fortunate. Shout out to the BFS mastermind and my people in that mastermind that I met in 2020. And then I was at a conference in 2022 listening to a panel discussion about selling your business. And Mitch McGinley, the boutique fitness broker, was on the panel, and he was talking about how any business can be a sellable asset, especially if you set it up accordingly. And I was like, wow, I never thought of this before. I never thought somebody would want to buy a Pilates studio when I didn't even think about buying a studio. I just opened it. So I never thought that I had a business that was sellable. I guess I always thought, people always ask me what my exit strategy was. And I was like, what a fucking stupid question. I have no idea what my exit strategy is. I'm going to close up one day when I'm ready to retire. That's what I thought. I didn't know anything really about business until I got into this mastermind, and people started really opening my eyes to truly, truly, truly thinking like a business owner. And so I decided at that point that I was going to prepare my business for the point where I could sell it if I want to. And so coming out of COVID, I made some very intentional decisions about how we ran the business and how we were running the business so that I could prepare it for sale. So I really started systematizing and processing everything. We built out a core processes manual, which was literally like every process we do in the business, from hiring, onboarding. What is our social media process? What is our newsletter process? What is our new client process? What is our customer complaint process? What is our maintenance process? What is our continuing education reimbursement process? What is our quality control process? And how do people qualify for raises and incentive bonuses? So we started to process everything, get it out of my head, put it down on paper, and start automating these processes and delegating processes and delegating accountability to people who are responsible for them. So that took, a while, especially starting about coming out of COVID, because we were at, in 2022, I think we we're at like, maybe that year we were finished the year like net zero. So in other words, we weren't losing money, but we weren't profitable either. So deciding how I was going to get my profit turned around in the next 24 to 36 months, was very intentional. And so for 2023 and 2024, our goal was profitability. Every decision I made in the business was to get to profitability and to get to 15% profit or more without decreasing my salary. So if anything, I was increasing my salary during that time. So I had surpassed 100,000. I was paying myself 125,000. I got to 135,000 while at the same time growing to multiple six figures in profit and removing myself from the day-to-day operations of the business. So I was no longer teaching group classes. I was going into the studio one day a week to see some physical therapy patients. I was covering as needed, but I was not responsible for performance reviews anymore. I was not responsible for staff meetings. I did a quarterly staff meeting with the group every quarter. I was not responsible for the hiring. I was basically overseeing the marketing. I was in the sales and marketing seat, and I was overseeing like the vision of the business and making sure that every decision I made, every decision we made as a unit was gearing us towards that 15% profitability that we wanted. Right. And so as I started giving people raises, because, obviously coming out of COVID, weren't able to give raises for a while. It was still with the intentionality of, I still want to hit this profit margin. And so how are we going to do that? Are we going to add more classes? Are we going to add more staff? Are we going to add more reformers? Are we going to add more hours of the day? Are we going to add additional revenue streams? Everything was so that I could get to an EBITDA. And if you don't know what EBITDA means, it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So you'll hear it a lot when people are talking about sales. It's EBITDA. It's basically like your net income, which is your net profit. Okay. So businesses that are between $1 and $10 million of EBITDA will get multiples of sale price and multiples generally between 4 to 7. But industries like ours, which is a service-based industry, and most of our EBITDA is low to mid six figures, we're probably looking at a 2 to 3, 2 to 4, maybe multiple. So for me, it was really, really important that I got myself to a $200,000 to $300,000 profit plus my salary, which is what they look at when they're going to list a business for sale in terms of what they call seller's discretionary earnings. Okay. Because if I have removed myself from the day-to-day operations, that means that they can basically absorb my salary and take it as owner's distributions right away. Or if they want to hire, even though I had a director of operations already on staff that was already basically running the business, already knew all of the processes, and so they could basically take my salary and add it back into the sales price. All right. So basically, I did a long, hard, search of myself and deciding what did I want as a business owner. And it was probably in 2023 that I realized like the business was doing great. We were going to hit at the end of 2023, I think we were up to a 8 to 10% profit margin. Okay. And so I was really, really excited where the business was going. I had a great, great team in place. We had systems and processes that everyone knew what to do. People were being accountable for their stuff and their daily tasks. And Pilates was growing. Pilates has had a huge resurgence post COVID, and it was continuing to grow and grow. And because we already had a really, really strong foothold in the studio, in our community, we were able to, grow tremendously after COVID. And so I had a couple decisions to make. Like my thought was, do we open up another location? We had the capital to do it. We had we had the brand, we had the capacity. But what I was thinking was, it's going to take 2 to 4 years to ramp up this studio to get it to where it's ready to open up another one. The hardest thing was hiring instructors. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall that I was like, oh, my instructors are starting to get older. Like, am I going to have to like keep funneling our teacher training program to get newer instructors and get newer instructors? And I just kind of felt like I had done it was kind of like starting a business from scratch, coming back after COVID, that I really did some soul searching myself and was like, is this something that I really want to do? Do I really want to continue to grow and open more locations? Because I knew what was ahead of me in that process. And at the same time, I recognized in myself that I do not do well in complacency. Like I just don't do well in status quo. I'm probably why I did really well in COVID, because when there's a problem, it's how I thrive in chaos. And so I also knew at the same time that I couldn't just sit idle and be like, okay, this is great, we're going to ride it out. It's just not who I am. It's not my nature. And by the way, even though you're sitting idle and being like, this is great, there's still problems. There's still fires to put out. There's still headaches that you have to have. And you have all of the risk of the business. Any single one of my instructors, my director of operations, my marketing people, they could decide one day, this is not right for me. I'm done. I'm out, and resign and go somewhere else. I, as the owner, cannot do that. We cannot be like, this is too hard. I'm leaving. Because at this point we have, hundreds of clients, several hundred clients that rely on us. I had a team of 17, 18 people that depended on me for their income. So I couldn't just be like, yeah, I'm done. I'm out. I couldn't do that. So I thought long and hard, like, what do I really want at this stage in my life? I'm 51. I'm 50 at the time, and my kids are getting ready to, my kids are in college or getting ready to go to college. And what do I want this next phase of my life to look like? And because the business was doing well, and because Pilates was such a hot commodity, I decided I wanted to get out on top and not wait till I had to get out. So I reached out to Mitch McGinley, the broker that I was talking to you about at the beginning, and I said, hey, listen, I think I'm ready to see, what it would look like to sell Pilates in the Grove, which is a really, really hard decision when it was a lifestyle business for me, right? I grew the business to fund my lifestyle, not really to sell, at least at the beginning. That was never the thought. In the last couple years, but I still couldn't like let all of my salary go back into the business because I needed that to put food on my table. So we met, he reviewed the business, he looked at my books. My books were very, very clean because over the last couple of years, I had really started to take everything personal out of the business. So I took my car payments off the business. I had very little personal expenses that I was running through the business. And the business was very lean and we were growing. So, I decided let's list the business, let's list it and see what happens. And so we did. And we got a couple of hits right away. I met with, gosh, how many people did I meet with? 4 people that were interested in the business. One person was another physical therapy place that wanted to acquire us and make this part of like their wellness arm of the business. We had another person who was already had multiple Pilates studios and was looking to expand out of state and wanted to acquire us for that. We had a husband and wife who were looking to open a business together, and rather than starting one from scratch, they really love the wellness space. And then we had same thing, another husband and wife that were interested. They had owned several different businesses and franchises, and they wanted to get into the wellness space. So I had 4 people that were pretty interested within a couple months of listing. I met with all of them, and I ultimately decided to go with the husband and wife that were looking to have a lifestyle business, and they currently wanted to kind of get out of their current careers. One of the things I was looking for was it was really important to me that whoever bought the business was interested in keeping the ethos of Pilates and Grove. They were interested in running it like a lifestyle business. They were interested in taking care of the people. They were interested in teaching the same type of method that we were teaching. I didn't need it to be classical, but I really did want to keep it a traditional studio, very traditional in terms of, honoring the method, even though we're technically not classical. So I met long and hard with people. One person, one group, I thought, well, one person violated their NDA and told somebody that they were talking to me about selling the business. And so right away I was like, okay, they're out. They can't even abide by a contract. Another person, the person that had the Pilates studios, I felt initially that she was a little bit in overhead with her own studios. And I thought adding 2 more were going to be really, really challenging. And it would just create a lot of chaos with my team. And I didn't want to leave them with that. And so ultimately, I decided to sign a letter of intent to go under contract with this potential buyer. So basically the process is this. Um, I recommend using a broker because Mitch was, and he was absolutely amazing throughout this whole process. I had known him, you know, tangentially before. We ran in the same, boutique fitness groups and circles and stuff, but working with him, he was like a true professional. And everyone that works with him on his team. And so I he basically handled like all the back end operations of that. And he presented me, put together I can't think of what it's called now, basically like a deck. Okay. And he brought the people to me and he interviewed them first. He made sure that they were a good fit. And then I would sit on calls with all of them. They could ask me questions. I could ask them questions. A lot of the questions they wanted to ask me were, why am I selling now? Things like that, like to make sure that nobody was buying, a money pit. And probably get to know me. And I really wanted to get to know them. And I had questions for them as in terms of what their goals were for the business. And ultimately, then the next thing is they submit a letter of intent with a sales price and a lot of the other assets that go into what's going to transpire during the sale. And I was very clear on a few things that were non-negotiables for me. I was not going to do an earnout. So what an earnout means is that, let's just say you agree to $1 million, okay, and that's going to be the sale of your business. And your business is valued at $1 million. That's what they're going to value your business at, right? So that's what the sale price. So they say, okay, great, we will give you $500,000 now, and you'll get $100,000 every year for the next 5 years, provided you meet these metrics or these KPIs. And I was very open from the very beginning. I do not want an earnout. I do not want to be tied to the business after someone else is driving the train, because I know this business inside and out. And I don't want to be responsible for metrics and KPIs when I'm not the one leading the ship. A lot of control issues there. I get it, but I was very clear from the beginning. I do not want an earnout. I did not want to have an employee contract after the sale. So oftentimes other people too will ask the owners to stay on for an X amount of time with an employment contract with a salary. And I was clear that I wanted the option not to sign on to that unless I really wanted to. And I felt like I wanted to with the new owners, which I kind of knew from the beginning that I did not want to do that. So those, and I also had the number in my mind that I wasn't willing to go under. The way that most businesses, like I said, in our industry are valued is you take your EBITDA, okay? So that's basically your profit. You can add back in some, if you write things off through your business, like your car or your phones, or again, you have a salary, but you are not teaching, you are not doing anything that involves with the day-to-day operations. It can be what's called seller's discretionary earnings, or SDE. And you take a multiple of that, and that's usually the valuation of your business. All right. So if you look at your profit at the end of the year and you have $100,000 worth of profit and you pay yourself $50,000, and again, you're not involved in any day-to-day operations, you don't teach, you're not responsible for clients or privates or anything like that. And you have somebody else running the business, you can add $50,000 to that. So that's $150,000. And maybe you'll get like a 3 times multiple. So your business could be valued at $450,000, roughly. Okay, this is a very, very rough money estimate. But if you're thinking about it, that's what I want you to start thinking about. It's your profit, okay, times a multiple of 2 to 3.5. So maybe 2.5 to 3.5. Now, if you are involved in the business, like you are treating patients, you are teaching classes, you are responsible for people go to you for all of the things, you cannot usually add your salary back in. Also, if you are the product, if you teach classes and are do the privates and it's your name and your face, your business isn't going to be as valuable to someone else coming in, because once you leave, people think everyone will go with you. And sometimes that's true. So I made it very, very intentional that throughout the years, Pilates in the Grove was not going to be about me, right? It was going to be about my vision, but it was not going to be about Christa Gurka. So that if I did choose to exit stage left, or even if I chose to stay on as the owner and CEO, that I was not involved in the day-to-day, people wouldn't see me all the time. And so that was really intentional on my part, even from the very moment I opened my business. Okay. So you enter into a letter of intent, you enter into a contract, basically, right? Kind of like buying a house. Like when you enter into a contract, you can't talk to well, I guess you can talk to them, but you really shouldn't talk to them. The other people can put offers on the table. And I think we actually did get one backup offer that was on the table during this one. And then you go into what's called due diligence. Okay. Due diligence is a grueling process. It is a process where the potential buyers literally dig into your business. They look at tax returns. They look at 3 to 5 years worth of tax returns. They look at 3 to 5 years worth of your balance sheet. They look at 3 to 5 years worth of your P&L. They look at 3 to 5 years worth of your sales, of your revenue, of your hiring. They look at everything. Some people will hire an accountant. Some people look at lawyers. They ask you to provide them basically your I feel like Rumpelstiltskin. Like they act like you give them everything, and probably including your firstborn. Okay. So they look at your contracts, your vendors. Then you have to start deciding, like, is your lease transferable? And if it's not, you have to talk to your landlord, and what's that process going to be like? Now, usually due diligence, there's a set period of time that you agree to in the contract. And it could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I know some are 4 months and some are 6 months. Ultimately, what usually happens, especially in big, big, big deals, sometimes they'll find something and they'll say, well, your recurring revenue is not what we thought it was. We're going to now bring our offer down $100,000, $200,000. Think of it like buying a house. It's like your inspection period, right? So if you have an inspection on a house that you're going to buy and you find out the roof is leaking, you're going to go back to the seller and say, your roof is leaking, so we're not going to offer you like as much as we initially were. So it's basically like that. But they ask you for so many documents and you have to go back and back and back and look. And oftentimes they're asking you questions, they're grilling you. It can get very, I don't want to say contentious, but it's a lot. They're asking you to explain all this stuff, and it's a lot. It's a lot, right? And so when that part is over, that's it. Now, one of the things I said too was I made it very clear that my price was my price. My books are clean. I know they're clean. And so you're not going to find anything in there that it is as is, right? You're not going to find anything in there that's fishy. And if you do, I'm not going down on my price. I was very, very clear about that. And I also knew what the business was worth, and I knew what it was going to be worth because we were on a significant growth trajectory as well. During due diligence is also the time usually that the buyers will apply for what's the word I'm looking for? Financing. Okay. So most buyers don't come to the table with a huge chunk of change. Some might, but most don't. And so they need to apply for financing. They can do that through their bank. They can do that through the SBA, the Small Business Association. But it's like applying for a mortgage, it's like applying financing for a mortgage. There's lots of paperwork, lots of things involved. And so it's a pretty grueling process, but that's on the buyer's side. Now, there are certain things that usually you have to have in order for the SBA or banks to approve the loan to buy the business. And so some of the things are a non-compete. just pretty standard. It's a non-compete and it's up to, I want to say maybe it's 50 miles. So usually you're signing a non-compete of some sort for 3 years, up to 50 miles. That's pretty standard. Another thing that the banks want to see is they want to see the lease terms on the leases for at least 10 years. Now, that doesn't mean they have to sign a 10-year lease. It means they could sign five. So they could sign a 2-year lease with 5 options. They could sign a 5-year lease with another 5-year option. But the banks usually want to see that they will not have a drastic change in their rent for the next 10 years. So we're going through due diligence. Due diligence, I think, is going great. Financing at this point was kind of taking a little bit of a longer time on their point, but I was already kind of set on this. And I was like, listen, I really like these people. I think they're going to be great. They were trying really hard. We met several times and I knew this was going through. So when I say that I discussed with Mitch probably October of 2023, that this was something that I was interested in doing. Fast forward, we've gone through meeting with all the people, deciding on an LOI, and now we're probably June of 2024. So it takes a while to get to this point. So June of 2024. And we're going through financing. I've hired an attorney. That's another thing. So besides Mitch, who was our broker, I have an attorney and the buyers have an attorney. And I really loved my attorney. He was great and he was really wonderful to work with. And, I would recommend him over and over and over again. And so he was great, but it's a lot, they're not attorneys are not inexpensive, but he was wonderful. And again, Ross Kohlberg, I'll give him a shout out. He works, and he's a Miami lawyer. He's a Miami attorney, but he was fabulous. And so I was really fortunate to be referred to him and he worked on my behalf tirelessly. So that was wonderful. Okay. So now one of the things that is happening is I'm deciding, how am I going to tell the team? What am I going to say in the interim? And one of the things is I'm very transparent with my team, but I didn't want to be too transparent. And if something went sideways, I was very protective of them. So I didn't want them to get scared or nervous that something was going to happen and I was going to leave and the business was going to go and everything go sideways. So I really tried to keep it under wraps, really out of protection for their mindset. And also, like, if this thing did go sideways, I wanted to continue status quo with the business, which was my plan. But somebody, I don't know who, thought that they saw what was the listing on Biz Buy Sell, even though it didn't list our name. And so I felt like it was my responsibility to control the narrative here. So I did let my team know that I was exploring selling the studio. And so now we're in the process. We're almost to the end. I finally say, I start introducing the potential buyers to members of my team. I introduce them first to the director of operations, who is really the person that's going to be their right hand when they come on into the business. And then I introduced them to the team. They came in, they sat through a meeting, they met the whole team, because at this point we're like in July and I'm like, okay, I was going to the Olympics. So I said, listen, either we have to close at the beginning of July or we have to close after July, after I come back in August, because I can't close and then leave for 3 weeks to Europe. That's just not going to happen. So it looked like we're going to have to push the close date because their financing was just taking a little bit longer. You know how it goes with financing. You have to get this person to approve it, and then you have to get this person to approve it, and then you have to get this person, you have to, and then also there was a little bit of a challenge working with the lease reassignments with one of my landlords because they thought that the new buyers were going to be a little bit over leveraged, meaning landlords want to be, their biggest concern is that they're going to get paid their rents. Okay. And so when you look at someone's financials and you see they have a bunch of loans, or you're just worried that they're not going to have the money to come up to pay the rent, even though, Pilates and Grove was super cash flow positive. But the worry is if I leave as a founder, and what happens if these people run it into the ground. So that took a little bit more negotiating than we thought. And so it just took longer. So I decide I don't want to be stressed. Let's push it to after I come back to from Europe. So at this point, I had been trying to keep my emotions very much in check because things go sideways all the time. They could decide to pull out. I could decide that I didn't want to continue to do this. And so I was very, very much, I was resolved to the fact that I was going to sell. I knew this is what I wanted to do. I had kind of mourned that I wasn't going to be the owner anymore. I really had worked through like the business was not my identity. And so it was, and there was like no earnout. I was going to get all the money up front when we closed, and I was very excited about that. And so I go away to Europe. I come back. We're ready to close. Everything looks good. I'm going to be in town for 2 weeks, so I'm excited. We're looking at the date. We have the closing date. Um, Luckily, this time, everything's great. You don't even have to be in person. Like everything can be done electronically, which I wish buying a house was that easy. But so they're signing their papers. I'm signing my papers. Things are held in escrow at this point. I think I forgot to say that they do, once an LOI is signed, they put what's called earnest money and deposit into escrow. It's kind of like a deposit. And if things go bad, I could keep the deposit, just the same way with like a house, right? So I'm like, oh my gosh, my business is going to be sold. I cannot believe this. I cannot believe this. I'm going to sell the business. I told very few people about it. My husband obviously knew. I think my kids knew. I didn't want to overly tell my kids. My kids are friends with a lot of people that are clients, etc. So, my parents knew, but it was I really, again, because I wanted to keep my emotions in check. And it was like, I don't know. I don't know. I just was like, felt how surreal this really was. And so we basically get to closing date, and all of a sudden, the last minute, the bank sends this one little piece of paper that is nobody has seen before. And it's something they want me to sign that ties me to their loan. And my attorney, myself, my broker, everyone was like, yeah, no, this is not happening. And had we known about this 3 months ago, we would have put the kibosh on it 3 months ago. I was never going to sign anything like that. And so, long story short, um, the sale went sideways. It did not close. We literally got to the last day. I had told my team had met them. They knew that this was coming up on the like end. I thought that by the end of, by fall of 2024, I was going to be, I don't think I thought I was going to be sailing off into the Caribbean, but I was like, this is going to be like phase act 3 for Christa Gurka and the Gurka clan. And it didn't happen. And I felt like I'd gotten the air sucked out of me. It was hard to have to go back to the team to say that it wasn't happening. It was hard for me to sit in the realization of this wasn't happening. And it is such a hard process. It's just a lot of emotion and meetings and talking and negotiating and all of this stuff to get to the end and realize like it doesn't happen. I mean, I feel like it's like going to game 7 of, a NBA finals or a hockey finals, and you lose by 2. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go through this all season again next year just to try to make it to this place again. And what if it doesn't happen? I have resigned myself to like, wow, I'm no longer going to be the owner. I'm going to have some more free time. And just like that, it doesn't happen. And, they initially asked if they could have more time to look for other financing. And I was like, you know what? Maybe this is the universe telling me that this wasn't the right deal, or this wasn't the right time, or there's something else on the horizon for me. And while it was really emotionally devastating, um, I mean, the good thing was that the business was doing phenomenal. The business continued to grow all of 2024. We were going to have our highest all-time year of sales, and we were going to have our highest all-time end of the year net margin. And so the good part of that was that because I kept running the studio like I was going to keep on running it, it continued to flourish, and the team continued to grow. And yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to get to the finish line and then not be able to cross the finish line. Very emotional for me, but again, I don't know why I felt like a little bit of I don't know what it was. Like I just felt something somewhere telling me like this wasn't the right thing. And so you made the right decision here. And so what I decided to do with, my broker, I was like, you know what, I just need to take a beat. I need to take a beat here. I need to figure out what I want to do. Do I want to sell it? I'm making a really good living off of this now. Do I want to sell it? Do I want to hold on to it for another couple years? See what happens. Maybe we will open up a third location and a fourth location. I have a great team now. And so in August, at the end of August 2024, I was still owner of Pilates in the Grove. And so I definitely learned a lot from that process. I learned how to properly value a business. I learned what's important that buyers are looking for. I learned what's important for owners to have gone through, like emotionally, and really take a step back and do like a 360-degree view of your business, of your life, where you want to go, what's the most important things to you. And I did learn a tremendous amount about business for me to be able to help other business owners that were looking to buy or sell their business. Because unfortunately, I've met with many business owners that have either bought a business on really poor terms or sold their business on really poor terms. And this is a decision not to be taken lightly. And I know people try to get around like hiring a big time attorney and all of this stuff, but the attorneys are what's going to save you and are what going to make you protect you from making bad decisions. And I'd probably paid already for in that sale, I'd probably paid, I was paying over $10,000-15,000 to my attorney, and nothing ended up transpiring from that. But I feel like he also helped me save myself from a really important decision. And so that $15,000 ultimately could pay off in the future with something else. And so attorneys and advisors are not something you should skimp on when you're making a super important decision like this. So I have spoken a lot now about the exit that never happened and what I learned about the business. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, or asking me more questions, you can hit me up over on Instagram. I'm at Christa Gurka. And be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode, because there's another part to this story. If you can believe it, there is a part two. So I hope you stick around. And until next time, my friends, bye for now.